Who comes out on top in a big battle of first-place teams between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Washington Commanders? Plus, can the Dak Prescott-less Dallas Cowboys defeat their division rival in the Philadelphia Eagles? The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show starts now.
It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 10 in the NFL is here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens, and we're bringing you every single thing from key matchups, key predictions, big storylines, and so much more. So from the primetime game of Lions and Texans, the big 425 matchup between the Eagles and the Cowboys, plus you got the Commanders and the Steelers with a great 1 p.m. game. All that matters a ton. We're going to dive into everything and go game by game to make you the most informed fan for game day. So much to dive into. And let's start with a look at the 1 p.m. Eastern time slate of games, but it's not 1 p.m. Eastern time just yet. We got a nice little 9:30 a.m. Eastern kickoff abroad between the New York Giants and the Carolina Panthers. So you got Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants and Julian Council of Locked On Panthers getting you ready for game time and diving into what you need to know.
All right, back here on a Locked On NFL Crossover Thursday. It's Locked On Panthers, hosted by me, Julian Council. Locked On Giants, hosted by her, Patricia Traina. And we are breaking down this Panthers-Giants matchup here in Munich, Germany on Sunday. And three things the Panthers and the Giants have to do. Again, Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends over at Price Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Patricia, start off with you and the visiting team, even though both teams are visiting, and talk about what the three things the Giants have to do. Now, typically, I say the Panthers got to do more than three things because they're not a good football team. They got to do a lot more than just these three things. But what three things are you looking at where they have to do it in order for the Giants to win on Sunday?
Well, I'm going to think big picture here as opposed to matchups and whatnot, because the teams are, both teams have their issues. So I'm thinking big picture. Number one, the Giants' confidence has got to be restored in some way, shape, or form. They say that they're still confident. They still we're going back. We're going to chop wood. We're going to get ready, fix the mistakes. I need to see it because there are times when you watch this team on the field and you say they're lacking confidence because, look, you keep getting beat, you lose your confidence. It does eat away at you. So I need to see confidence. I need to see Daniel Jones be more than just a game manager, which is what he has been primarily this season. I need to see the pass rush wake up. They went to sleep last week against the Commanders, as I mentioned earlier in the show. They've got to wake up, whether it's Bryce Young, whether it's Andy Dalton. The pass rush has got to get after the quarterbacks. They've got to force mistakes. They've got to force turnovers. They can't beat themselves. The Giants at times have beaten themselves with mistakes. So play a clean game, play complimentary football. And just, look, the two teams are pretty much evenly matched, I would say, except for a position here, a position there. It comes down to who's going to make the fewest mistakes, who's going to play with more confidence, and who's just going to want it more.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. You look at these two teams and you mentioned that like they are pretty evenly matched. And typically, especially at the NFL level where all these games are typically one-score games, and the Panthers actually played their first one-score game of the season last week in that 23-22 win against the Saints. It comes down to just not turn the ball over. And I would have told you a week ago, the only way the Panthers win a game is if they win a turnover battle. And they did not win a turnover battle last week, and that was the first game they were able to win because the only game that they had won so far this season had been against Las Vegas on the road where they didn't turn it over. But looking at this game from the Panthers' perspective of things, you got to let Bryce Young cook. And I'm sure someone out there is cackling right now by me saying let Bryce cook, but we have seen him grow in confidence. We have seen him in this offense the last 2 weeks. Dave Canales, if he's going to let him play, has seen an opportunity to let him grow and use his strengths. Why not let him sit back there, and cut it loose. We saw a couple times on Sunday the throw to David Moore that should have been a touchdown. David Moore dropped. The throw to Xavier Legette, which was taken away by New Orleans and turned into an interception when really, I mean, that's, I don't know, called a fumble instead. Bryce Young should not be credited for that turnover at all. There's some good passes. Then on that 3rd and 10 on the final drive, sat back there, took a 3-step drop, let it rip, 26 yards, helped set up that winning touchdown. Like, let Bryce Young just go out there, show confidence in him as he's having more confidence in himself. Got to get pressure. And I know that this has not been a great team as far as getting pressure this season. I can see some vulnerabilities there with the Giants offensive line. Daniel Jones is somebody who is known to have some whoopsie daisies when it comes to taking care of the football throughout his career. So if you can get some pressure on him with DJ Wooden coming back and, again, doing this before the end of the trade deadline, Jadeveon Clowney still around, having those two guys out there for the first time this season would be great as far as getting some pressure. Then the last thing to me, defensively, they're not going to be a turnover machine. They're not going to be able to get a bunch of stops, but bend, don't break. They got the stops in the red zone last week. They were able to go punt, end of turnover on downs, the final 3 drives there against New Orleans on Sunday, albeit a banged-up New Orleans Saints offense. If they're able to bend, not break again this week, I think they have an opportunity. So got to be able to get some pressure on the quarterback, let Bryce Young cook, open up the offense, and we'll see what this game looks like on Sunday as the Giants and Panthers face off in Munich. Again, the Giants right now are favored. Any final thoughts, Patricia, before we get out of here?
Predictions you want?
Yeah, predictions, final thoughts. If you want to go, I have no prediction. My prediction is everybody's going to have fun.
There's going to be a barn burner, right?
Yeah.
No, the last thought I want to say is, both teams are coming in, I think, Thursday night. I know the Giants are flying in Thursday night. One thing that I'm going to be looking for is energy level. And I guess, I think the Panthers are also coming in Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think energy level is kind of an X factor, if you will, here. Brian Daboll, when he spoke to the media on Monday, he said, we're leaving Thursday night, sleep on the plane, then hit the ground running. Julie, because you just made that trip, that's not easy to do. You've got jet lag, and when you're sleeping on a plane, unless you've got those recliners, and even that is kind of, not the most comfortable thing as sleeping in a bed. So I'm curious to see what the energy level looks like, how, the players respond, flying for a number of hours that can dehydrate you. So these are all things I'm sure the Giants and Panthers have taken into consideration, but which team is going to have more bounce in their step would be, the big thing for me to watch. And as far as a prediction, I don't even want to go there because I haven't gotten it right at all this year. But I will say this, I'm not picking the Giants. I will not pick the Giants until they give me a reason to believe in them again.
Patricia and Julian are great. Be sure to check out Patricia over at Locked On Giants and Julian over at Locked On Panthers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now we hit the 1 p.m. Eastern time slate of games. And first up, it has to be the matchup of the entire slate. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Washington Commanders, 2 first-place teams duking it out. You got Russell Wilson, Jayden Daniels, and we have Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers and David Harrison of Locked On Commanders getting you ready with everything you need to know heading into game time.
This week's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Steelers, Locked On Commanders, brought to you by Prize Picks. And Chris, let's jump right into it, man. What are the 3 things the Pittsburgh Steelers must do in order to get this road victory? Field goal underdogs, by the way, this road victory on Sunday.
Yeah, it went up from 2.5 points to a whole field goal. It's been slowly moving in the way of the Commanders throughout the week. But first thing, and I say this almost every week, you got to make them one-dimensional. The Steelers' entire defensive philosophy is about, we're going to take away the run so that we can put you in predictable passing situations so that TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Cam Hayward and now Nick Herbig and Preston Smith, all these guys, they're coming for you, and you're going to have maybe 2 to 3 seconds to get that ball off. And we're going to trust that our coverage behind it can create some schemes that'll confuse you. Or if you try to rush the throw, we'll be in position to make the interception and create turnover plays. That's the first key there. Stuff the runs so you can put yourself in that situation. Second key, protect Russell Wilson back there. Like you were talking about getting after him and trying to get that. Broderick Jones has been struggling. The first round pick from last year, he's been struggling in pass protection with his hands. If I'm the Steelers, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that he is not killing Russell Wilson and killing drives by giving up pressures in this game. The Steelers expect to get center Zach Frazier back for this game. He's their starter. He's their second round pick this year. He's been phenomenal when he's been healthy. And I think that's somewhere they can trust. But if I'm looking for anything, if I'm the Commanders, I'm trying to circle Broderick Jones. If I'm the Steelers, I'm saying we are protecting Russell Wilson. And then the third thing here is get Najee Harris going, because when you get Najee Harris going, it creates so many problems for the Steelers. And I think that's a byproduct of Russell Wilson having time to throw the ball, because then he'll hit some passes. But if you get going, and against this Commanders defense that has struggled against the run, you grind clock, you force more pressure on Jayden Daniels and that offense to figure things out. And then you also build that rhythm for the more play action passes where you'll be able to strike more. And then if you're also running the ball, when you get inside the red zone, you won't have to rely on Van Jefferson sitting in the right spot. You won't have to rely on George Pickens tapping his right foot twice versus getting his right and his left foot down at the same time. You'll just be able to run the ball well and get into the end zone the old-fashioned way. So those are the main things. You got to stuff the run, make it about Jayden Daniels being one-dimensional in predictable situations. To protect Russell Wilson, especially on the Broderick Jones side of things, and then 3, get Najee Harris going. They do those 3 things. I like their chances in this game. What are 3 keys for the Commanders?
Yeah, man. I think, first of all, they got to find their run game. Even if you don't have Brian Robinson Jr., which I will admit to everybody here, Commanders fans, we're going to talk about a little bit more on our final episode of the week. I'm being a little bit more cautious. We'll use a nice word for myself, and I'm going to say cautious about Brian Robinson Jr. because they have Philadelphia on Thursday night following the Pittsburgh Steelers game. So if I'm being a little cautious there with B-Rob, that's going to be why. But you also don't have Chris Rodriguez. Chris Rodriguez is basically the other power back that the Washington Commanders have on the roster. He's a practice squad player. He's already been called up 3 times, which means if they need to use him again, they got to sign him to the active roster, which means we're releasing a player that I don't know that they're going to want to go ahead and release. So if you don't have Chris Rodriguez, you don't have Brian Robinson Jr., you still got to find a way to at least make the running game, keep the Steelers defense honest too, open up some of those middle of the field lanes and try to create some of that confusion like Chris was talking about before. Number 2, I told you this was going to come back. Sleight of hand offense that Arthur Smith is running with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I watched every single explosive play that this Steelers offense has gained this season, and almost all of them involve the Steelers tricking a defender into getting out of his lane. I'm watching cover 3 corners who are supposed to be in a perimeter third in their zone in the middle of the stinking field, following a motion that they should not be following, and the Pittsburgh Steelers taking an easy completion or lane and saying, thank you for that wide open third of the field, my friend. We will take all of them yards right there. Discipline, discipline, discipline. Mike Tomlin just has a history. I know Arthur Smith is the offense, but Mike Tomlin teams know how to make you look foolish. Do not get out of position on defense. Please, dude. It reminds me, I don't remember the name, that Magic movie where all they're robbing everybody with all their magic. That's what it reminds me of, is the Steelers are just going to steal all your yards with their sleight of hand. Don't do it. Fans can watch the ball. Defenders, watch your assignments. And then finally, adopt the Marshawn Lattimore mentality. Look, I don't know if Marshawn's going to be on the field this weekend. We'd love to see him on the field if they can get him out there this weekend. But it's not just the hamstring; it's communication. How fast can he get?
Were you talking about Now You See Me?
Yes, that's the movie I'm talking about. Now You See Me.
Sorry.
One of the things that Dan Quinn talked about Marshawn Lattimore was his willingness and ability to compete close up. I'm talking about stepping up. And Dan Quinn goes back to Atlanta, right? Julio Jones getting right up in his grill and competing close quarter combat with one of the best receivers in the NFL at the time. That is Marshawn Lattimore. That's the dog in him that makes him as good as he is. Adopt that mentality as a secondary. Don't just let these Steelers wide receivers run around and try to get their routes on you, try to get their stems and their breaks, and just hope that you can be better on the read. Go out there, have that dog mentality. Even if 23 is not on the field, adopt the Marshawn Lattimore mentality. Those are the 3 things, Chris, I think the Commanders have to do to secure that 3-point or better win this weekend.
Be sure to check out Chris over at Locked On Steelers and David over at Locked On Commanders, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. San Francisco 49ers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, big matchup for both of those teams. Christian McCaffrey expected to be back for this game for San Francisco. Big for them. You have Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers and James Yarko of Locked On Bucks with the key players to watch, key matchups to watch, keys to victory, and a lot more.
Wrapping things up here on a Crossover Thursday, and Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So we have the Bucks, we have the Niners, and I don't want to speak for all Buccaneers fans, but I know in my heart, I have a soft spot for the 49ers, excuse me, because of my never-ending love for John Lynch. He was one of my favorite players when I was a kid growing up watching the game. I love the success that he has had as a general manager. I think he's done a great job. So when they're not playing the Bucs, I always pull for the Niners, and I want to see John Lynch succeed as much as humanly possible. But taking a look at this game, could be getting McCaffrey back. You have Warner who's getting healthy. It's kind of tough when you're going on the road from the West Coast to the East Coast, especially with a 1:00 kickoff. But what are the keys to victory for the 49ers in this one?
Yeah, and look, John Lynch GMs with the same aggression that he played safety with too. And so it's been fun to watch it. Just a quick funny story. When he was hired, I went scouring. I was like, there must be another executive around the NFL that has the name John Lynch, because it's not the TV safety guy, right? That couldn't be it. And it turns out, no, it was actually John Lynch. And it turned out to be a fantastic hire for the 49ers. He's been really good working hand in hand with Kyle Shanahan. I don't know if Todd Bowles is going to get that win over Kyle Shanahan in this one. And I don't know if it's necessarily an X's and O's thing, although it's funny that Kyle Shanahan really has people's number and does really good jobs against certain coaches. And then some coaches have his number and he always struggles against them. And it's really interesting how that works. And it tends to always work out that way. And so we'll see if it continues to go that way. But for the 49ers, I do expect, even though it's an East Coast game and an early start and some travel, they're coming off a bye, short week for the Bucs. They went into overtime with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I would think that would all nullify and make it a pretty even game, even though it's a road game for the 49ers, since they're well rested and getting some players back and coming off a bye. And Kyle Shanahan, by the way, I think he's only lost one game the last few years in November and has been really good post-bye. And really, the 49ers are a couple games away from being 6-2, or a couple plays away from being 6-2 right now. We'll be talking a lot, really, much differently about the 49ers. But I think the path to win for the 49ers is don't do the things that have led to those losses that they should have won earlier on in the season, right? When you've got a team down and you got a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, finish them off. You got to score touchdowns instead of kicking field goals. And this is a team that's kind of struggled in the red zone. I think that's a place where Christian McCaffrey could potentially help, even though, he's not a bulldozing type of running back that you would expect. Oh, you're going to pound the ball into the end zone. He's just really good in tight spaces. And he's also good catching the ball out of the backfield and put stress on a defense. So, that red zone defense, don't get weird and start turning the ball over if you're the 49ers. And, and I think that's the path to victory because, unfortunately for the Buccaneers, they're just not at full power right now. And you can't take them lightly either, because we saw what they went toe-to-toe with the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 8-0 right now. And the Chiefs throttled the 49ers just a few weeks ago too. So this is still a good opponent for the 49ers. On paper, I do like the Niners to win this game. And I think for the 49ers, they just have to play their ball. And it really goes beyond just this week. It goes for the season. They need to be the team that they've supposed to be all season long. They've kind of taken one step forward, one step back. After the bye, take a deep breath, reevaluate, and be that team. That's what the 49ers have to do on Sunday.
Yeah, and full disclosure, the time change in the early kickoff, that's more wishful thinking on my part. I don't think it's really going to play into this game at all. But for the Buccaneers, the big keys in this one is they have to run the ball and they have to do it effectively. You have to defend the middle of the field, especially against George Kittle and this Shanahan offense. And then finally, be aggressive. The Bucs have had really good success running the football, especially against some of these top rushing defenses. They outperformed the yards allowed per game from the Baltimore Ravens, and they did it by the beginning of the second quarter. They did it again last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. This week, they're going up against the Niners, another top 10 rush defense. They allowed about 105 rushing yards per game, but you have to pound the rock and control the clock. I have said it week in and week out since Evans and Godwin went down. Those are the keys. You have to control the clock and keep your defense on the sideline for as long as possible. String together these 12, 13, 14 play drives that end in points. As far as the middle of the field, again, it's wishful thinking. KJ Britt has just not been able to develop that part of his game. You saw a lot of JJ Russell coming in for KJ Britt against the Chiefs, and it really still didn't help very much. So you have to find a way to prevent those passes right over the middle of the field from converting on third downs or turning into giant chunk plays with the speed of Debo or McCaffrey or even Kittle to an extent. And then finally be aggressive. I mentioned it a little bit ago. The Bucs have to win the turnover battle. If you're going to give yourself a chance, you have to be able to take the ball away. So go for broke. You have to absolutely lay it all out there. And yeah, you might give up a big play, but you have to be aggressive and you have to try to take the football away. Put yourself in a position to make that splash play. And on the offensive side of the ball, air it out. Air it out to Callaway. Air it out to Palmer. Take those deep shots down the field because it might be an explosive play on either side of the ball that could be the difference between the Bucs losing or the Bucs getting a big upset.
And can I just say, and I'm sure you've talked about this a ton, I don't have a problem with not going for 2 from Todd Bowles. I didn't like the timeout before that because if the game ends going for 2, you either win or you lose, that's fine. But with 30 seconds and 3 timeouts, if you lose if you don't get the 2, but even if you get the 2, they might still go kick a field goal in regulation to beat you. So that's why I didn't have a problem with not going for 2 there because it didn't end the game with a win. I didn't like the timeout before that. I just wanted to get that out there, James.
See, and that was how I opened my show afterwards was you had to go for 2 there. And I ripped Todd Bowles up and down. And then his explanation after the game made it even worse. He said because of the wet conditions, they felt better going to overtime. I'm like, how on earth does that make any sense? You just marched 71 yards in 1:49 and you had that defense on the ropes. Go for the win. And Bucs fans, by and large, have said they would be more okay with the loss having gone for 2 and not getting it than doing what they did. But as far as the timeout, there was a reasoning, and I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head. Todd did not want to use the timeout there. There was some sort of communication issue or a personnel issue or something where they were forced to call the timeout. He wanted to hold on to it. He wanted to run more time off the clock. And who knows? Maybe if he doesn't have to use the timeout there and all of a sudden they score with no time left on the clock, maybe they do go for 2 in that situation. I don't know. But yeah, I know he said that he was upset that he had to use his timeout because he didn't want to use it there. He wanted to run more time down.
Well, look, if there's one thing that Kyle Shanahan can improve upon, it's game management too. So let's hope it doesn't come down to game mechanics at the end of this one.
Brian and James know their teams. You can check Brian out over at Locked On 49ers. Check James out over at Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next, let's move into a big AFC West matchup, the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City still undefeated after that narrow overtime win over the Buccaneers in primetime. And the Denver Broncos coming off of a pretty brutal loss to the Baltimore Ravens. So, Sarah Bedinger of Locked On Broncos and Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs take you through the big AFC West divisional game.
It's funny because when you and I talked before this show started, I think you mentioned how the Chiefs are -4 in takeaway. And one of the things you also said you want to talk about with this show is winning the turnover battle. And that has been a key for the Chiefs the entire season is they need to try to find a way to win the turnover battle. This is the first week that they're going to be coming off a game where Mahomes didn't turn the ball over. They still lost the turnover battle because Kelsey had a fumble and they didn't get a takeaway. But this is the first week that Mahomes hasn't thrown an interception. It's crazy to think about that going into week 9. Sorry, I guess this is week 10, playing your 9th game. But that's where Kansas City has been. What have you seen from the Broncos so far this season?
Well, the Broncos have done a good job of creating havoc for the opposing quarterback and setting themselves up really well to cause turnovers. I mean, we saw it against Carolina. We saw it against the New Orleans Saints. I mean, we've seen it against quarterbacks that, they may not be the best quarterbacks in the league, obviously, but also against Baker Mayfield. They baited him into a really bad throw early in that game, and that helped them go up 14-0. So you see the Broncos with their pressure package and what they're able to do to kind of frazzle quarterbacks happen against Aaron Rodgers. they can get turnovers a variety of different ways. They can create turnovers, obviously, by getting that instant pressure, causing a rush throw, or they can, hit the quarterback and knock the ball out. So it's not like they're the Green Bay Packers averaging 2 or 3 turnovers a week right now at this point, but the Broncos, that is a strong suit of theirs, is getting to the quarterback, rushing his decision-making process, or popping that ball loose. They've been able to do that at times this season.
Yeah, and the question is going to be, can Kansas City on defense force Bo Nix into bad decisions? Bo Nix has 6 interceptions this season. Obviously not near as many as Patrick Mahomes has had, but that's still quite a few interceptions this early into the season versus only 8 touchdowns. So that's going to be something to watch there as well. Can you keep that turnover or the TD to turnover ratio a little bit higher? I'm going to be very curious to see if they can force him, because one of the things that we talked about in the last segment with the Chiefs defense is Spagnuolo sending pressure and you have no idea where it's going to be coming from. If he is able to force them to throw the ball earlier than he wants to, or force him to hold on to the ball for a split second longer than he wants to, the pass rush is starting to get home for Kansas City. That could play a big favor into the Chiefs defense being able to help get this win against the Broncos.
Yeah, it could. What they need to do to try to get him to make those poor throws is to make sure that he's not able to set his feet properly. That's where Bo has gotten himself into some trouble, is when he doesn't properly set his feet. He's done a good job of feeling out the pressure and making throws under pressure, but when he doesn't set his feet, the base obviously being off, it forces the throw to either be behind or too low or too high. Those are the 2 interceptions that he's thrown since the first 2 weeks of the season. He had 2 picks against the Seattle Seahawks. A couple of both of those were pretty bad. Then he had 2 picks against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But since that time, the interception that he threw against the Chargers, that was tipped up in the air by Marvin Mims. The interception that he just threw last week was completely the fault of Lil Jordan Humphrey, who should have caught the pass. So obviously the quarterback not always at fault for interceptions, as we know with Patrick Mahomes having, his receivers, sometimes they let the ball hit them in the hands and obviously it pops up in the air. So that's the biggest thing there. The distinction of, is he making bad throws at times? Absolutely. Is he putting the ball in harm's way consistently? That's a different discussion, because Bo's not really putting the ball in harm's way very often, which is interesting. And I'll be fascinated to see how the Chiefs try to force him into doing just that, because that's been a strength of his dating back to his time at Oregon as well. So that, like you mentioned, the turnover battle, forcing these quarterbacks to make poor decisions. There's no Justin Simmons in Denver anymore. So who's going to pick off Patrick Mahomes this time? I don't know who will do it. He's been the guy the last handful of years.
I'm hoping nobody will be the answer that I'll be giving right now. But what I would say is, the thing that you mentioned is, if he can set his feet. The one thing that plays into Kansas City's advantage is they probably have the best defensive tackle in the NFL, who's going to create havoc in the middle of the offensive line and is going to cause him to be moving around in the pocket more than just setting his feet, getting ready to throw. So Chris Jones, I think, is going to have a huge impact in this game because he always disrupts offenses and their timing. That is going to be a huge key. If he can continue to do that, and you start to see situations where they bring in a brand new pass rusher in Joshua Uche this past week, is he going to be a guy that can maybe start getting around the edge and putting pressure from the backside? That would be something that would really help out, especially with Karlaftis actually being limited in practice today. That could be huge for the Chiefs. When you look at this game, Kansas City heading in 8-0, Broncos are 5-4. How are you feeling about this game and how you think it's going to turn out?
I feel really good, honestly, about it, Chris. I know the Broncos are coming off a blowout loss to the Baltimore Ravens, but a loss like that can really help you refocus. And of course, it's entirely possible that the Broncos go to Kansas City and get blown out once again. They're one of the youngest teams in the league, got a rookie quarterback going up against the undefeated back-to-back Super Bowl champion. So nothing would surprise me, but this team has been playing really hard and they do a lot of things really well when they play at their best. We've seen the Broncos, they've been up there among the best in the league in terms of overall point differential. The game against the Ravens knocked that back down to earth, obviously, but when they've been playing well, they've played really well on both sides of the ball. And so I think anything is possible in this game. My biggest keys, like we mentioned, the turnover battle, obviously, you always want to win the turnover battle in the NFL. Capitalizing when you cross midfield. We talked about that earlier, how the Broncos, they didn't capitalize when they got past midfield against the Ravens. You can't give away extra possessions to a team like the Chiefs, and you've got to score 7 when you have the opportunity as opposed to 3. And then no self-inflicted errors. I mean, you could point back to a comedy of errors that happened against the Baltimore Ravens, starting with the interception we just talked about. Little Jordan Humphrey pops the ball up in the air. You give Lamar Jackson a short field to work with, and the Broncos stopped him, but that's not the point. The point is that you gave him a short field to work with, and you can't do that against these teams. Let them steal possessions if you want to win a game like this. So the Broncos, can they go to Kansas City and get a win? It's going to be fun to see. I think they can. And I told you before the show, and for all of your listeners, Chris, I manifest a win for the Broncos no matter what. So realism, you could throw that out the window. FanDuel, you can throw the 8.5 points out the window. I've got the Broncos going in and getting a win in this game because I'd rather be right about predicting a win than right about predicting a loss. So I'll go with manifesting a win in this game, even though I do acknowledge that it's going to be very tough. Because the ball bounces the Chiefs' way. It just does. They have a built-in margin for error that is unlike anything that I've ever seen against whoever they play. It doesn't matter if it's the Super Bowl, if it's a week-to-week game. Kansas City Chiefs have the biggest built-in margin for error that I can ever recall for an NFL team, and that's just because they're just good in every way.
And I appreciate you saying that. The thing I would argue is I don't know that the ball has been bouncing Kansas City's way every time this year. I think that it has in certain instances. Obviously, there have been some times where it's bounced against Kansas City, but they've still found ways to overcome it. And that's really what we talked about last segment with the Chiefs offense is it may not look pretty, but they find a way to get things done. I mean, they're down there, number 1 running back. They're down their top 2 wide receivers, top 3 wide receivers the past couple of weeks until, obviously DeAndre Hopkins probably jumps up to being one of those guys now. But, Juju was a top 3 wide receiver for this team before they traded for Hopkins. He's probably still out this week. So you look at what they're able to do on offense. They've had to change everything that they planned on this season. They had a huge plan for Hollywood Brown. It hasn't panned out, obviously, because he hasn't played a snap for him this year other than the very first snap in the preseason. That's the only snap he's played for this team. And then you look at what happened to Rashee Rice. He's been out since week 4. That's something that they've had to overcome. Worthy is playing okay, but he's not playing. He's not obviously lighting the world on fire. But, offensively, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. And as long as they give him the ability to sit back in the pocket and at least look around at the field for 2 or 3 seconds, Kansas City is always going to have a pretty good chance to win. The one thing I will say is you made a great point. When you're in a situation where you get across midfield, they've got to put it in the end zone. And I say that specifically because one of the things that really I could not believe, and one of our, actually James from Locked On Bucks actually said this after the game. He called his coach a coward for not going for 2 to try to win before they went to overtime. And my whole point with that is that you have to have the mindset of if you're going to beat this Chiefs team, you have to be aggressive. I'm not saying you have to be overly aggressive, but in that situation, you have 30 seconds left in the game. That's a situation where you say, okay, we just went and scored a touchdown. Is it more or less a good idea to go for a 2 and try to keep the ball out of Mahomes' hands to win the game? Like, that's really what it comes down to. You said it yourself. He finds a way to get things done, and that's what he's been doing, and they continue to win. I think Kansas City finds a way to win this game. I'm going to be curious to see if it's close. The game against the Bucks was supposed to be a 9.5-point game. I believe it ended up being 6 in overtime. I think that the weather should be better this week, but Kansas City has been able to run the ball. That's been something that has made their offense a lot more effective. What I want to see is Kansas City's defense play better this week. I think they get the win. I think they move to 9-0. And then we're going to be talking about the Chiefs and the Bills, which is going to be the game of the week after this.
I can't wait for that game. I always love watching the Chiefs go up against the other powerhouses in the AFC. Going to be interesting to see because the big storyline for the Broncos as of that last game against the Ravens was, can you hang in big games like this against good teams? Like, all right, you're 5-3. Like, we had the same record as the Ravens going into that game. that's cool and that's cute and all, but can you actually play with these teams? That's something that they're still working at proving that they can do. And so this is a great test for them. Win or lose, blowout, close game, it doesn't matter. We hope the Broncos can keep it close, obviously closer than that Ravens game. I know you guys over there, you don't necessarily care about it being a close game, but for the Broncos side of things, like, can you prove that you belong in big games like this? Because you showed against the Ravens, a lot of people, hey, we don't belong in this game. That's got to change against this Kansas City team.
I disagree with you. I do care. I don't want it to be close. And it's not
I know you don't.
It's not that I don't like the Broncos. It's just I'm very tired of watching the Chiefs play close game after close game after close game after close game. I want to not have my heart rate be, and my stress level be at level 9. Just watching.
You guys play the Raiders soon. You can do it against the Raiders. Take your blowout win against the Raiders. So we'll see about this one here.
Even against the Raiders, it wasn't. I mean, it was a blowout for the most part. They scored points at the very end. I'm not saying it has to be a blowout, but I would like to see a 2-score game going into the fourth quarter. I'd feel a lot better about that. But it's a big question because this Broncos defense is fantastic. But I will say this. If you go back and watch how the season started, Mahomes wasn't on the same page with his offense and wasn't on the same page with his wide receivers. He has looked markedly better the past couple of weeks, especially against the Raiders 2 weeks ago and against this Bucs team that they just played. If he continues that trend, this is going to be another big game for him. And I think that we're going to see a fun Chiefs offense.
Sarah can be found over at Locked On Broncos. Chris can be found over at Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the show, we still have the last part of the 1 p.m. slate to dive into, so be sure to stay tuned here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. A lot coming your way coming up. First, the show is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on maybe a Patrick Mahomes rookie card, Lamar Jackson rookie card, that's just not in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. But thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. A lot of cards that people are listing are from the last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and a clear hit rate for each one. And for the Arena Club slab packs, it's amazing. You got the display of available cards is incredible. The hit rates are awesome. The grading is top-notch. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. First, this show is brought to you by Hims. Ever feel like you need a little boost? It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so you can feel confident whenever you're in the mood. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find options that work for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details on important safety information. Prescription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan. We are back here, the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Kevin Allstriker still here with you, taking you through a great slate of Week 10 action. We just talked about some great matchups. We have more great matchups to talk about right here. Let's start off with the Bills and the Colts, a big AFC matchup. Buffalo looking to continue doing great things, and the Colts still trying to figure out which direction to go between Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson. I know there is a little bit of turmoil in terms of which side some of the Colts fan base is on with that. So we got Joe Marino of Locked On Bills and Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts with everything you need to know about everything going on with these two teams.
All right, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, which is presented by Prize Picks. Remember to go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Joe. So on the line, the three most important keys for the Bills to win this one?
I think number one is heat up Joe Flacco. You know, this is a quarterback that, like you mentioned, has played 17 years. He's seen every defense in the world. He's seen every disguise. You got to pressure him. And I think you got to try to take advantage of some younger players on that Colts offensive line. You have a lot of depth on your defensive line if you're the Bills. I think there's been times this year I feel like the Bills pass rush has been pretty quiet. And I don't think that can be the case this week. I think they have to get after Joe Flacco, who obviously is limited in terms of mobility. And so you want to take advantage of that and really heat him up and not give him time to just use his experience and, you know, slice up your zone defense. So that's number one for me. Number two is don't let Jonathan Taylor kill you. You know, the Bills make their choices with how they choose to defend the run. And this is probably a matchup where I would dare Joe Flacco to beat you throwing the football. And I'm not saying that you load up with 8-man boxes or anything like that, but I would be willing to roll down a safety. I'd be willing to run blitz. I'd be willing to do some gap exchanges to try to get some negative plays because I'm sure the Colts want to see it, but nobody wants to see Jonathan Taylor go off like he did last time and certainly how he's capable of performing. And so because of I don't not respect the Colts receivers. I just feel like the Bills do have good matchups with Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas and Taron Johnson. So if you wanted to play a little man coverage, you want to play a little one high, middle of the field, close, single high safety type stuff to help your run fits, do it, because I feel like you can take your chances more with some of the coverage options you have. And so this isn't a game to let Jonathan Taylor go off. I think that would be a mistake. And then number three, I think it's probably a good idea for the Bills to have a pass aggressive game plan on offense. I have a lot of respect for the Colts front on defense, two great defensive tackles in Buckner and Stewart. And you mentioned they're humming right now. I think the second level is really good. They've been inserting this Grant Stewart a little bit, giving them some sparks as a extra player sometimes when they want to go with some more base traditional looks. And so I would be willing to kind of take your chances. I don't know if Keon Coleman's going to go, but they should get Amari Cooper this week. Khalil Shakir is a very good slot receiver, yards after catch. Dalton Kincaid is a tight end option. I think you use your backs out of the backfield. The Bills have had a lot of success throwing the ball to James Cook and Ray Davis. I think you want to come out pass aggressive, a little bit like they did against Seattle, to allow yourself to kind of get that lead and maybe force the Colts to not be two-dimensional on offense and really make it a Joe Flacco game throwing the ball against your secondary. And so I think I'd come out trying to score points through the air and really kind of close the game out in the second half, running it if you can.
No, I think that putting heat on Flacco is legit. You know, last week against the Vikings, they didn't get to him until the final drive of the game. It's like Flores said, we're not messing with this anymore. And then boom, 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 3 sacks on the final drive after not having any. So, I mean, that's legit. I mean, Joe can't really escape all that. But for the Colts side of it, I agree. Jonathan Taylor is kind of the linchpin of this thing. Get him established early and try and ride him throughout the game. The game that still haunts you guys, I think that was a once in a lifetime type of thing. Like, that was an enormous game, but I think he's still capable of those 150-yard games. And it doesn't even have to be that. Just use him consistently throughout the game. They just have these long stretches where they abandon using him. And there's not much explanation afterward other than we like what Trey Sermon offers us in this instance and things like that. It's like, all right, Trey Sermon's nice, but he's not Jonathan Taylor. So ride Jonathan throughout the game as long as he's productive and things are working there. And my next point to that, if that is working, allow that to create play action opportunities for you with Joe Flacco. Obviously, this appears like it's going to become a more traditional offense. So, you know, if you're under center and, you know, you can get the play fake to Jonathan and crank back and go to Alec Pierce downfield. I think there's ways for this to work. They also like Alec Pierce on the deep crossers as well. So not everything has to be this big, you know, go route for him, but just try and establish the run game and allow it to create play action opportunities for you. And then the last, obviously this is easier said than done because Buffalo's offense is doing a lot of things right now. Try to affect them in some way that's been uncharacteristic. They're not giving up sacks. Obviously, Josh Allen, the least sacked quarterback right now, and they're not turning it over either. So either get a couple turnovers on them or, you know, get to Josh Allen and make it to where he's not comfortable. Obviously, it seems like the defensive line is probably the best way to do that. But the Colts, they rank up there in takeaways as well. So I think if you can get a little bit of pressure on Josh, maybe make him make some errant throws or just, some questionable decisions, what have you, you could probably force them into uncharacteristic mistakes that they just haven't really been making this year and that have allowed them to win a lot of games.
Yeah, I think the organic pass rush opportunities for the Colts should be interesting. The Bills are a really good pass blocking team. Like you mentioned, Josh Allen's the least sacked quarterback in the NFL. But I think that the blend of traits that the Colts defensive line has, a lot of length, a lot of size, a lot of athleticism, you go ahead and rush 4. And I feel like you should be able to cage rush a little bit here and really kind of lock in Josh in the pocket. And, you'll be able to drop 7 and give yourself some chances, if Josh will put it in harm's way. But I think that their organic pass rush should or could be challenging. I don't think the Bills have played this complete of a front. They played teams with good defensive tackles, but really didn't have the edge. Teams with good edge rushers, but not really the interior. This is a team that I feel like can put 4 across, that has a lot of talent and juice to really get after you. So I think it'll be a unique matchup in terms of how the Colts can win with their organic pass rush against the Bills, who have been a very good pass pro team.
And, the Colts may not be using Anthony Richardson on the field, but, I think he's simulating a little bit of Josh Allen this week. So that's something that not every opponent has. So, that's a use they could get out of Anthony this week. I just hope they wisely account for his legs, because that, he's one of those unicorns that, okay, he's a really good passer, but what makes him Josh Allen is his ability to use his legs as well. And I don't feel like the Colts have always been super heady of that situation. They have allowed some guys who can move around with their legs to do so freely. So I'm just really hoping the Colts factor that into the game plan a little bit.
Be sure you go find Joe over at Locked On Bills and Jake over at Locked On Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, big NFC South matchup. The New Orleans Saints fired Dennis Allen. This is the first game with an interim head coach for them. And the Atlanta Falcons looking to take advantage of a Saints team that has been reeling ever since their scorching start. You got Ross Jackson, a Locked On Saints, Aaron Freeman, a Locked On Falcons. Great conversation between these two as they dive in everything you need to know leading up to game time.
All right, everybody, crossover Thursday here, Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints, breaking down this New Orleans Saints hosting the Atlanta Falcons matchup. We're going to take a look at the things that the Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints need to do to get a win, while the Falcons look to kind of push away that interim coach bump. As always, crossover Thursday brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, where you can use the promo code Locked On NFL in all lowercase and get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Aaron, what is it that the Atlanta Falcons need to do to avoid that interim coach bump that you have dug into and found that the Atlanta Falcons have not fared so great against in the past?
Well, I think the first thing the Falcons need to do is they need to stop the Saints on early downs. I think the second thing is get off to a fast start offensively. And then the third thing is not fall into the trap that comes with facing an interim head coach. And going back to that first thing, normally I would say you got to stop the run. But and that's a big part of the Saints' early down success. In their first 2 games of the season, I looked it up. They were number 1 in the NFL in expected points added per play on early downs, first and second down. Since then, the Saints are number 31st. So they won the first 2 games. They were number 1. They've lost the last 7 games when they've been second to last. And so it's essentially, if you can stop the Saints on early downs, you can stop the Saints. And so again, stopping the run is a big part of that. And that's where you got to slow down Taysom Hill. You got to slow down Alvin Kamara. You got to have Troy Anderson in this lineup to help do that. And then getting to the second thing, which is going to help with that first thing, is just getting off to a fast start offensively, right? The best run defense for the Falcons, who have not had a particularly good run defense this year, has been their offense. And you saw that the last couple of weeks when they've been able to get leads, and that forces opposing teams, that happened in the Tampa Bay game, happened in the Dallas game, to basically abandon the run at a certain point because they're playing catch up. And you saw this last week with the Falcons having 3 sacks, again, almost matching their season total of previously 6 sacks in their first 8 games of the season. And a lot of that was owed to the fact that they got an early lead. and their pass rushers were able to pin their ears back. They were able to run a lot of twists and stunts and games and all that various things and get after Dak Prescott and eventually Cooper Rush in that game. So if the offense can score points early, that's going to be not only a boost for the Falcons run defense, but also the Falcons pass rush. And then the third thing, don't fall into the trap. Now, Raheem Morris said there's no such thing as a trap game in the NFL earlier this week because basically you have to be prepared each and every week. And he's right in that sense. But when I refer to the trap, I'm referring to the fact that the Saints have a new coaching staff, and that new coaching staff with Darren Rizzi getting rizzed up,
rizzed up, baby,
is going to, I have to say it because I've been pushing Kirk Bimber and Kirk Tober on everybody else. So, if you want to come up with your own hashtags or slogans, Ross, I will support you in that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
But,
Thank you.
Basically with the new coaching staff, there's going to be new energy in the building. And this is a golden opportunity, as we've been discussing, that they can throw some new wrinkles into things. Like you can't just go into this game expecting, okay, we know what a Dennis Allen defense is. We've seen it for the last 7 years. We've seen, what a Clint Kubiak offense is, but now you have a different guy that can basically go to Clint Kubiak and say, okay, let's switch some things up and you can catch the Falcons sleeping and thus have that sort of trap game.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Waterboy?
I have.
The commentators in the Bourbon Bowl where they're like, last game of the year, can't hold anything back now. Yeah. That's how I feel about the New Orleans Saints going into this game. They're that, right? It's the last game of the year. Can't hold anything back now. Might as well just throw it all out there and see what you got, right?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I get the concern there in terms of where that comes from. I will say that when it comes to like limiting the early downs, that is key for dismantling the New Orleans Saints attack and Clint Kubiak's attack. If this team gets behind the sticks, they struggle. Plain and simple, right? They just struggle. I think the Los Angeles Chargers are the great blueprint for that. I think the Saints were like 13% on third down because so many of their third downs were 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 16, 3rd and 20, like all these other situations. And some of that was the Saints shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and stuff like that. They're fine in terms of the amount of penalties that they have. The issue is when the penalties take place and how the penalties end up killing their drives. So yeah, I think that's an astute observation. And then coupling that with fast starts obviously complicates things for New Orleans as well. For the Saints, I think the things that they need to do really come down to what they're doing to themselves in terms of avoiding like the self-inflicted wounds and things like that. So I do think that it's important for them to play fast and play free. And what I mean by that is not hamper themselves, not hold themselves back in this situation. They also need to be able to run and preferably do so with Taysom Hill, who had 2 touchdowns. He's kind of got to finish what he started in Atlanta. He's got to finish that job here in New Orleans. He had 2 touchdowns against Atlanta earlier this season. And then I think a big one is just showing up in the fourth quarter. The Saints have been in a lot of situations where they have had their defense on the field with a lead and have not been able to win that game. And the Saints need to get past that. And so I don't know if the Riz helps them do that, right? Gives them a little bit of that extra motivation, if you will, but they've got to get games closed out when they have the opportunity to do so. But I honestly think the most important one out of those 3, Aaron, comes down to Taysom Hill, because the Saints are simply going to need a counterpunch to who has been their most productive player, which has been Alvin Kamara. And Taysom is the most likely one to do it. He's the only non-new face that's involved in the consistent part of their passing attack. I think getting their tight ends involved would go a long way too, but that has been a struggle for this team on a consistent basis. So I think those are 3 things they got to do. I would love to see them play fast, play free, have fun again, especially in a rivalry game like this. But really, it's all going to come down to their ability to be able to close it out if they get into a situation where they're in a good scenario by the time that the fourth quarter rolls around.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you play the Falcons, there's a good chance you'll be in a good situation going into the fourth quarter because pretty much all their games are one games.
And any situation in the fourth quarter is a good situation against the Falcons, right? Isn't that what we've learned?
Something like that, right? They've been better this year. Thanks to
that's true. That is true.
True. We're leaving the past behind. That's basically what
we'll see about that. Listen, I think the Saints I think they kick this one off. And even if they don't win, they're massively competitive in this game in a way that nobody expects them to be. And then they probably come crashing down to earth after that. But I just think the emotional charge of this game with the new interim head coach, and the rivalry of it all is going to be enough to kind of give this team a jolt. My biggest concern is their wide receivers. Who are they throwing the football to and everything like that. And so unless Marquez Valdez-Scantling's about to go off, and Mason Tipton, their rookie wide receiver, undrafted guy, goes off and stuff like that, they don't have like familiar guys they can go to. So I think that's where it gets in trouble. But I think New Orleans is going to come in with a lot of charge, a lot of motivation, a lot of determination in this game, and at least keep it interesting.
Yeah, I think that's true. So I think, that's what gives me hope in the fourth quarter, is that if the Saints have to go down the field and put points,
sure.
Not having Chris Olave, not having Rashid Shaheed, we'll see if the Falcons can keep Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau in check and whatnot. But I think that's the one thing that gives me some hope, that if it does come down to a one possession game and the Falcons need to go down the field and score, they should be able to do it. And hopefully this Falcons defense will be able to prevent this version of the Saints offense from doing it in the closing minutes.
Ross and Aaron are so great. You got Ross over at Locked On Saints and Aaron over at Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Vikings and Jaguars. The Vikings looking to pick up a win over a reeling Jacksonville Jaguars team. Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings and Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars have the keys you need to know for this game, because it might be one that surprises you.
Let's try to figure out what's going to happen this one. I don't know about you. I don't like trying to predict the score. I think usually the numbers you say are pretty arbitrary, but I think we can try to suss out exactly how this one's going to go. So in the most abstract sense, it sounds like when somebody walks in with a very clear guy that they want to funnel the offense through, that the Jaguars aren't going to sell everything out to stop that guy. They're going to let that guy get his yards and hope they can win the game anyways, which, by the way, that's what the Lions did, and it worked out pretty well for them. So that's not as crazy of a strategy as it might seem. But I mean, is that do I have the right vibe on that with the Jaguars? Is this maybe a game that Justin Jefferson can go get his?
He can get some. They're just a bend but don't break team, and that sounds about right with Jacksonville. I will tell you this: I never expected them to get blown out in any game, and they only got blown out once, and that was on national TV against Buffalo. And then they let it get away from them in London against Chicago. So they're usually their own worst enemy with how they come out of the locker room. I do believe they got a problem, and you're going to notice it. Everyone notices. They rotate their defensive ends after 3 plays. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. You got Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, a guy that has $80 million in guarantees, and the dude that was the number 1 overall pick. And there are times when the other team is driving at critical points of the game, and they're not even on the field. You're going to wonder why. And people just say that's Ryan Nielsen and the way that he does things. But they've pretty much been a bend but don't break team. The problem is when they do break, it's like a dam, and it's hard to stop. And they just let things go on. And for these little stretches that really cost them a whole bunch of games. They've lost 5 games by 5 points or less. That's just who they are.
So is it the kind of game then, the Vikings have gotten out to some really white-hot fast starts this year. If that happens again, the Vikings get up 10-0, 17-0, which has happened a lot. Is it the kind of thing where Jags fans are just turning it off? Or because the Vikings do let teams hang around and crawl back, but you got to be capable of it.
Well, that's a problem then, because if you're going to be a sitting duck for them, the one thing about them, they're scrappy. And
they are scrappy. Because if you're down 17-0, it's halftime. Maybe you get 1 touchdown at the end and you're 17-7 and you feel it, right? Like I feel like some teams are just still going to feel really bad and just keep getting smoked. And some teams go, no, we got this. Like, is that their character?
Yeah, and this is the good part of that. It's bad that they get behind, and it's bad that they have this big, I use the word variance in how they play. And it's not even from week to week. It's not even from game to game. It's from quarter to quarter. And the thing about that, Luke, is don't get ahead. I told Peter Bukowski this in that same stadium a couple of weeks ago. Green Bay was up 27-17 with the ball. It's like 8 minutes to go, and they're just running the ball. And they got a 3-and-out. I texted him, and I said, this is a mistake, because this is exactly what they do. They want you to sit there. Doug Peterson will hold his timeouts until tomorrow, and he will score, and then the defense will get ramped up. If they get the ball back within 2 minutes, they get to go into their 2-minute offense, which they thrive at. So if the Vikings make a tragic mistake in this game, it will be getting out to a fast start and then saying we got them, and looking at their record saying they're 2-7. The next thing you know, the game's going to be tied because they are that type of team that are capable of doing that. The problem is it takes that motivation for them to be losing in order for them to start playing well, and nobody around here can figure out why they just can't do that from the very beginning. You'll see it. You'll look at their record and go 2-7, and you'll go, they're way better than that. What is wrong? And that's the problem with Doug Peterson and this team right now. And the people in Philly said this is the same thing that happened to him up there after he won the Super Bowl. It's like, it's a head scratcher because he's a nice guy and you know what they're capable of sometimes, but they just don't always do it.
So Vikings games have been very swingy. You could describe a lot of them, and a lot of them have, right? Very uncreative gamers call it a tale of two halves every single week. And if that's where we're at and the Vikings get off to a hot start, they go into halftime, the Jags crawl back, it ends up being a close game. If the Vikings do pull that game out and it happens again, right? Oh, nice comeback, moral victory, but fell short. Is that the end for Doug Peterson?
I would think because they have a game next week against Detroit, no, unless the owner wants to send a message because they know they're going to get steamrolled against Detroit. And Detroit had to, trust me, and this ain't no slight against Minnesota, but you saw Detroit and you've seen them and you watch them closely.
What they've been doing to everybody.
And how they do it. Teams like that.
You got to go there, right?
Yeah. Teams like that, they're going to come in and they just uppercutting you all day. And it's just like, if you got any flaws, they're going to find them. If you got a weakness, boom, they're going to hit you. So the thing about it is there's a chance that it happens. I've been looking forward for a couple of weeks, but it hasn't happened. And Shad is slow to fire. He's slow to change. You got to wonder, though, because of Trevor, if he fires Doug Peterson, he's going to probably fire Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator. And then you're leaving like Mike McCoy to run the offense, and that's the quarterback's coach. I think they need to make sure.
That is a name I have not heard in a long time.
I know it, right? I know it. It sounds like something from the Hall of Fame, right? But no, Trevor also is banged up now. They went and got C.J. Beathard off the practice squad. This is a story that came out.
Old friend.
Yeah, this is a story that came out after I recorded my local, but prior to us recording here. They had to go get Beathard because Trevor didn't even practice today because he has a little bit of an upper body injury. And that some people were speculating that what that is they know they're cooked and you know, it's a PR move. They're going to get hammered. And at least people can say they got hammered while their quarterback isn't out. So we'll keep an eye on that to make sure he's going to be available. But they're banged up at receiver. Christian Kirk is out for the season. Brian Thomas Jr. is ailing a little bit. Gabe Davis has been out. It's just, for me, Travis Etienne hasn't played well, and he's been banged up. And when he wasn't banged up, he wasn't playing well. Just like Murphy's Law, everything that could go wrong does go wrong. I'll tell you this from our perspective. I got a feeling, without predicting a score, Justin Jefferson will be huge. But I think Sam Darnold is going to throw a touchdown to a tight end, and I think Aaron Jones is going to catch a screen pass and take it. They have a problem with running backs catching the ball here too.
Oh boy. He does like to do that, although the screens have been kind of weird. That might be a movable force against stoppable object.
Yes, sir.
But we'll see what happens here. I think as it has been with the Vikings for years and years and years, you can be favored by 14 points and it'll still be a close game. Right now, the line at FanDuel is Vikings by 4.5 on the road. Certainly never going to be one to overlook.
Great stuff from Luke. Great stuff from Tony. Check Luke out over at Locked On Vikings and Tony over at Locked On Jaguars, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last of the 1 p.m. slate, Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears take on Drake May and the New England Patriots. Battle of the rookie quarterbacks. You got Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots, taking you through the game and everything you need to know.
Thanks for tuning in to our Locked On Bears, Locked On Patriots crossover podcast today. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use our promo code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears here with Mike Debate from Locked On Patriots, looking at some of the keys to victory for both of these teams. Mike, I think we've been focusing a lot on the trenches for good reason here. Does it apply the same on both sides of the ball for New England, or do you have more confidence in that defensive line than you do in the offensive line there?
Well, honestly, I do have more confidence in the defensive line than I do the offensive line, and that's simply because of personnel and continuity. But at the same time, you look at this defensive line, and the Patriots have not been able to stop the run. They haven't been able to consistently be a force up front and find players that can come up and help Devon Godchaux, who's really been a one-man show when it comes to run stoppage and it comes to being a force in the front. Christian Ellis, Raekwon McMillan have had moments, but they haven't been consistent enough for the Patriots to say, okay, well, they found their guy that can take some of the pressure off of Devon. So if the Bears are looking to take advantage, if they can win battles up front, they get a very good chance to keep this Patriots defense on its heels and really gain some pretty big yardage, most importantly on the ground. But they do have the ability to beat the secondary if they can put a lot of pressure on this team. On the offensive line, obviously, it's about limiting pressure. It's about taking Drake May and giving him the opportunity to step into his throws, make throws from the pocket, and be able to make things happen. Also, the Patriots are going to need to get consistent run blocking to be able to open up that running game and utilize the outside zone looks that Alex Van Pelt wants to incorporate with Ramondre Stevenson. And then on third down with guys like Antonio Gibson that can take pressure off. So a lot is going to be opened up for the Patriots if those two lines come to play. If they can do their jobs, yeah, the Patriots always have a puncher's chance, and I think they will have a puncher's chance in this one. If they don't, it's going to be a long afternoon in the Windy City for the Patriots.
So, like, what does it look like? Like, what does a Patriots win look like? Like, if we fast forward to the game's over and the Patriots won by whatever score, what does it take for them? What would they have had to have done in that game that succeeds, like puts them to that path to a victory?
First and foremost, they need to win the battle on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They need to be able to dominate or at least control the game from both sides of the line. If they do that, the Patriots always have an opportunity to win. They need to be able to control the time of possession. They also need to keep the flags out of the officials' hands. This is one of the more penalized teams in the league right now. They need to play smart, consistent football, not beat themselves, and they need to protect the ball. They really need to avoid the turnovers that have been so costly for this team. So even though it sounds so rudimentary, Lauren, even though it sounds like it's very basic, these are the things that the Patriots need to do to win. But if they are winning and they are doing these intangibles, it involves a strong running game. It involves Drake May taking shots down the field, stretching the field with some of the pass catchers that he has, and some of them can do it, like Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, and even a Tyquan Thornton, who's kind of been forgotten about in this offense. He's got the speed to do it. If he starts hitting these guys and then utilizing the red zone for short runs from Ramondre Stevenson and short passes from Hunter Henry, that's how this team can win. And on the defensive side of the ball, if they can use Christian Gonzalez to lock down one of the top options that the Bears have in terms of a pass catcher, whether it be DJ Moore, whether it be Cole Kmet, Roma Dunes, it could be Keenan Allen, whoever the Patriots decide to focus in on, that's the other members of the secondary have to step in and do their jobs as well. All of that has to come together. It sounds like a major stew with a lot of ingredients, but that's the type of product that the Patriots are putting out right now. Going to take a complete team effort to win a ball game.
From the Bears side, I think there's, even after they've struggled the last couple of weeks, I think there's a confidence level that the Bears defense will be able to get a couple turnovers off of Drake May and the Patriots offense and generally hold them, under 20 points at a maximum there, right? Like thinking probably in the, 13, 14, 17 point range is where this Bears defense can hold them. So then the real question for Chicago then is, can Caleb Williams and this offense rediscover some of the things they were doing well a month ago and get back to just like non-messy looking offense? They just haven't been able to consistently find a rhythm and keep him upright and clean and let him operate and get the ball to all those weapons you were talking about. Like the whole point of trying to put Caleb Williams in this team was, okay, you give him Moore and Dunze and Allen and Kmet and DeAndre Swift, like he's got some of the best weapons you could hope for any rookie quarterback coming into, and they just haven't been able to find ways to really maximize that talent and get the most out of him and get the most out of them and put those guys all in position to succeed. But like the talent is there. It's just about getting more out of it. And I think they look at this Patriots defense as something that's a little bit more vulnerable than the last couple of playoff caliber teams they face, and that this can be the game to kind of get right and right the ship a little bit before they got a bunch of divisional games coming up on the schedule that they're trying not to look ahead to. But if the Bears don't find a way to get the offense going against the Patriots. If they find a way to lose to a 2-win New England Patriots team, there's some real smoke around Matt Eberflus's hot seat right now. The Bears have never fired a coach in season, and I still think a loss to the Patriots wouldn't have him lose his job, but they might have to start firing some kind of assistant, some kind of scapegoat opportunity here midseason, because this would be as close to rock bottom as it feels like the Bears season could get at this stage of the process.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. And it's amazing to hear that consistently week to week, that losing to the Patriots could be a catastrophic thing for opposing teams for so long. Back to when my predecessor, Mark Schofield, had this chair and this microphone talking about the New England Patriots being, a team that was always formidable. It's tough. It's tough to hear. But at the same time, you're absolutely right on the money. And I agree. I think this week is going to be a very difficult week for the Pats. I think they're out talent matched when it comes to both sides of the ball by Chicago. It's going to be whether or not the Patriots can play up to their level and whether or not they can force Chicago into some mistakes. To me, that's the only way they come out of the Windy City with a win this weekend.
Be sure to find Lauren over at Locked On Bears, Mike over at Locked On Patriots, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That'll do it for the 1 p.m. slate of games, but don't go anywhere here in the Ultimate NFL pregame show because there are 4 p.m. games that are absolutely great. So we'll dive through those coming up here on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. So for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, finding jobs, networking, connecting. LinkedIn has it all over there. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Can the Dallas Cowboys defeat their division rival and the Philadelphia Eagles despite having no Dak Prescott? I'm Kevin Ostreicher. This is the Ultimate NFL pregame show where we get you ready for game time with the help of our local experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Great slate of late window games in week 10, and we have to start off with the big one. You got the Eagles and the Cowboys. Obviously, Philadelphia looking to take advantage of a Dallas team that just lost their starting quarterback in Dak Prescott. Dallas was reeling otherwise as well. So we're going to get into it with Gino Camilleri of Locked On Eagles and Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys.
It's a crossover edition of the Locked On Eagles and Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk, wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. All right, Gino, let's talk about some keys to victory. What are the 3 things the Eagles need to do to secure this win over Dallas?
I'll continue where we just left off. I think, number 1, lean into running the football. Saquon Barkley, he's a guy that he has been efficient in some spots after he gets going. It might take him 1 to 2 to 4 touches to get going, but after a while, he always just hammers home a big run at some point in the second half that is almost backbreaking for a defense. Continue to run the ball. Number 2, possess the ball for a long time. Dallas is going to try and do that against you. You want to limit the amount of possessions this Eagles offense has. Use it against them. Possess the ball. That goes hand in hand with the run game, and it goes into my final one. Be efficient in the red zone. They've gotten down into the red zone a ton. If you look at that Jags game last week, they were able to punch it in, but there's a lot of spots where they're leaving points on the board. Don't allow Dallas to hang around when you leave 8 to 10 points on the board like you did against the Jaguars last week. It came back to bite you against Atlanta, almost came back to bite you last week. But this week against Dallas, I think you know the plan. Stick with the run, possess the football, and punch it in the red zone.
For Dallas, it's really as simple as don't give away yardage. Last week we saw a bunch of dumb penalties, just to say. I mean, they had a 12-man on the field penalty on a 4th and 1. Coming out of halftime, Mike McCarthy is giving an interview that was pre-recorded about how, hey, we need to stay ahead of the chains. We got to stay ahead of the sticks. That's how we win this game. As that interview is playing, Terrence Steele false starts in the first play of the game. Like
poetry.
When you have a backup quarterback, you can't give away yardage. It's not just penalties. It's making the right plays on special teams. It's not dropping passes, right? You've got to, yards are going to be hard to come by in this game when you have Cooper Rush playing. So don't give away yardage. On defense, you're going to surrender yards. Like Philadelphia is going to move the ball up and down the field, but you have to get stops in the red zone. Make them kick field goals. Make them try to go for it on fourth down. Figure out ways to try to prolong this game. And the number one thing for Dallas is turnovers. Like going into this game, they are just they don't have the talent Philadelphia does. They have injuries. They have massive injuries. The Pro Bowl and All-Pro players. But turnovers in the NFL can be the great equalizer, right? And the Cowboys have been awful with turnovers this year. But if you're +2, +3 in the turnover margin this week, that's how you stay alive in these games. So again, Dallas is probably going to need a lot of turnover luck to win it. But we see it every week. Teams that end up being +2, +3 win games that they shouldn't.
I think it's a great point because if you look at the last 4 victories, Jalen Hurts has not turned the ball over a single time, whether it's an interception nor a fumble. You look at the first 4 games, though, 2-2. He was turning the ball over like he didn't want to hang on to the thing, and he just ate a whole bunch of buttered popcorn. That's the way Dallas has to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
To an extent, they have to be a little bit aggressive on defense, in my opinion. I think you have to make Jalen Hurts read things pre-snap, post-snap, and give him multiple looks. Even though he has been good going through his progressions, he's also very aggressive. He's going to put the ball in spots for his playmakers to make plays, but those are tight window throws where you're off an inch, you're off up or down 1 degree, it could be an interception. So that's how you have to win the game if you're the Cowboys. And I think at the end of the day, there it goes again. I keep saying at the end of the day, it might come down to whoever can be the better kicker in this one. Jake Elliott, he was primed for the last couple seasons. He's been iffy on some of these +50 field goals, hit the upright last week. But Brandon Aubrey, man, like what an absolute freak of an athlete.
Honestly, that's going to be a big on kickoffs, right? If you just down the ball in the end zone, you get it at the 30.
Mm-hmm.
If the Cowboys offense can get 20, 22 yards every drive, you are in Brandon Aubrey field goal range.
Let him kick it.
Yeah, a 65-yard field goal. Like he easily has a distance. You're right. Like this could be a game where the field goal kickers matter. Gino, the last thing I want to say is I just wish this game had more juice for Dallas. Like I know it's huge for Philadelphia. They obviously have to win to keep pace for Washington. But as a Cowboy fan, you want these games to matter a lot. And unfortunately, without Dak and with the Cowboys being at 3-5, it just doesn't have the same juice as some of the other Philly Dallas games before. And I know Philly fans that are listening to this don't care at all. It's not quite the same. That's all I had to say.
No, I'm with you. We've only seen Dak versus Jalen one time. Like, are we going to be able to have a series where we're like, oh, it's 4-3? Can this be Jalen Hurts' grudge match to get it back to even? And I think we're going to see that with Jayden Daniels now in the rotation. At least 3 of the 4 teams have it figured out at the quarterback position. Maybe the Giants one day get into this rotation.
Let's hope not.
But I'm with you. I always say, and I think I said this last year on the crossover, like, it's the Joker and Batman. We need each other. Like, we can't live without one another. And the best games are when these teams are the best and they matter the most. I think back to 2018, the game where the field goal or the kickoff goes and 6 Eagles are landing on top of him. There's like, oh, no clear evidence. And it's like that game mattered so much to Philly, and it's so inconsequential in the grand scheme of things.
Or the game last year between Philly and Dallas, right? Like the game that was an awesome game.
Yeah, and it decided the entire race in the NFC East. Like, that's great football. And I know one person who's a little upset about that. That's Jura. He wants to make his money, and he would love for this one to be a nice primetime game. Okay, Marcus, how weird is it that it's on CBS, though?
It is strange. Right?
I don't like it.
Yeah,
Eagles Cowboys on CBS, that does not feel
I know.
right.
To me, this always feel like, Sunday afternoon Fox games with Joe Buck.
America
and
game of the week. Yes, every single week.
So it's different, but hey, maybe CBS will be nice if we get a good game. So we'll see.
Be sure to check out Gino over at Locked On Eagles and Marcus over on Locked On Cowboys, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The New York Jets got in the win column and it felt good for them, especially as the first one with Devontae Adams. The Arizona Cardinals have defied expectations this season, but a big game for both teams coming up. We got John Butchko of Locked On Jets, and Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals with what each team needs to do to win.
Pivotal is an understatement for both of these teams. The Cardinals, people are looking at like you said, why are they so fascinating? Why are they 5-4? And then you look at the Jets, and I picked the Jets to win the AFC East to start the season. It seemed like, to me, and I've not been an Aaron Rodgers fan for the entirety of his career. You can respect and appreciate greatness while not liking the other stuff. I still choose him to win one game over Josh Allen in a vacuum. I think that there's just some je ne sais quoi about him that we're starting to slowly see. It's been a slow burn for you. It's been more fun for me. Like that second half against Houston, I'm like, oh, if that happens 80% of the time the rest of the year, they're making the playoffs. So pass to victory, John. Give me your 3, how they beat the Cardinals at State Farm Stadium on Sunday.
Well, great segue. Number one, they have to protect Aaron Rodgers. And the reason I say that is the Jets have been a little banged up on the interior of their offensive line. Their two guards to end that game were actually backup tackles. Olu Fashanu, the first-round pick out of Penn State, and Max Mitchell, a fourth-round pick from a few years ago, because they've suffered so many injuries at the guard position. Can Rodgers play the way he did the second half against Houston 80% of the year? I think a lot of it comes down to, can they protect him? Because this is not the guy in Green Bay who was super mobile. In Green Bay, I think he was great at breaking the pocket, moving left and right. To me, that's one of the things that set him apart from mere mortal quarterbacks. He's 40 years old. He's coming off an Achilles injury. He's been dealing with a couple other lower body injuries that have further hindered his mobility. What he can do is he can read a defense. He can get the ball where it needs to go. So if you protect him, good things can happen. If you can't protect him, he can't really create the way he used to outside of a play structure. So that's number one. It's maybe an obvious one. I mean, I think every game you could say the key is protect the quarterback, but given how banged up the Jets are on the offensive line, given Rodgers' current limitations, I think that's critical. Number two, kind of alluded to it earlier, the big guys on defense have to play like big guys. Quinnen Williams has started to rise to the occasion. I think the last 3 weeks, he started to look like Quinnen Williams. So he got off to a slow start the first 5 weeks or so. And every week on my post-game show, Alex, I'd be saying, he's going to be fine. Quinnen Williams got a big reputation. Finally, we got to a point where I said, I'm a little worried about Quinnen. And I don't know, maybe he was tuning into Locked On Jets then, because that's when he started to produce. That's when he started to look like his old self. Sauce Gardner's been struggling, and it's time for Sauce Gardner to step up. Jets have a lot of talent on this defense, as we alluded to. There have been moments where they've looked as talented as they are, but there have been moments where they've underachieved this year. It's time. You keep saying it, Alex. 10 weeks, we're week 10. When's it going to happen for these guys? When are these guys going to start looking like big time players? And number three, something I alluded to earlier, Jet special teams. And it's funny. This team has missed the playoffs 14 straight years. They have not had a winning season since 2015. But if you look through the stats, through most of those, not all, but most of the seasons, they've had really good special teams. It's not been this far the fault of the special teams. This year, they've had issues. Greg Zuerlein is on IR. Whole conspiracy theory in the Jets fan base, Alex, was he really injured because he's having an awful year? You could say that his missed kicks contributed to at least 3 losses this year. They stuck him on IR. People are like, well, did they just not want to cut him? Like, is he really hurt? I think he's really hurt. And I think part of the reason I think he's really hurt is that kicker mechanics are so precise that one little thing, an injury, can throw off your mechanics entirely and cause you to miss kicks. Thomas Morstead, the punter's not having a great season. Xavier Gipson, their primary return guys, he's broken a couple of returns recent weeks, but hasn't had a lot of big time returns. They've made some penalties on special teams. They made some mistakes. They've got to clean up the special teams. And I think going on the road against the Cardinals team that's been a bit of an enigma, but still a quality football team, you got to win the third phase of the game. I think that for me, that's always critical. I talk about it a lot on Locked On Jets, how critical special teams are, how underrated special teams are. Jets are in this position right now at 3-6. It's not entirely because of special teams. It's not the number one reason, but it's played a role.
Yeah, and the Cardinals are 5-4 because of special teams. Otherwise, we'd have a very different conversation with them, most likely at 2-7. So, that's an interesting segue back. It's how you do the little things is how you do everything, and the little things is special teams. It just seems like that's a thing. It's good teams, great teams don't worry about special teams ever. It's the Matthew Slater effect in New England. It was just there. It's a constant. And that's something that the Cardinals have done well. It's a week by week thing, two young kickers and punters, but yeah, so far so good for the Cardinals. Now, path to victory for the Cardinals, the first one, and you're going to witness the first time I say this because this has been not a point of contention because it's been a positive, but a point of anomaly, I guess you could say. Don't focus so much on how the Cardinals offense is being run as long as it's being run effectively. Like the Cardinals have won by running the ball like they did last week, over 200 yards. And they won the week before by Kyler Murray throwing for over 300 yards. Taking what the defense gives to you and exposing that and hammering that exposure over and over and over again is how the Cardinals are going to win games because they can do it in myriad ways. If you stop the run, they've got enough playmakers on the outside to make things happen. If you want to keep Kyler Murray in the pocket, he'll find ways to kill you in there. Or if you want to flush him out of the pocket, he's very comfortable throwing on the run. But just letting the defense tell you how to beat them, that's how the Cardinals offense needs to operate. And they did it last week against Chicago, and then pivoting towards an even better defense this week, that's what they're going to have to do. Now, number two, obviously get after Aaron Rodgers. This pass rush has been non-existent. I've called them popsicle figures at times because they've been on milk cartons, and then they had 6 sacks last week. So it's really as much production as you can get out of the pass rush, you'll take. The difference this past week was the exotic blitz packages that we saw, whether it be Mac Wilson from the linebacker position, Budda Baker from the safety position. Like they need to continue to mix it up and keep Aaron Rodgers guessing because Aaron Rodgers needs 0.2 seconds to get the ball out. So they need to get there in 0.1 seconds, or he's going to be eating if he's going to be having a tea party in the backfield. Aaron Rodgers terrifies me because he needs very little time to get the ball out, whether it's a wide receiver screen or what have you, or to get the ball to the running backs out of the backfield. That terrifies me more than most things. What terrifies me the most is the big play for New York. Now, we haven't seen it as much as you'd expect. More was from Breece Hall, who doesn't get in the end zone, which is weird. I don't know. It's a weird like Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert thing where they refuse to get Breece Hall in the end zone, but the Dallas Goedert, Braylon Allen part of this gets in the end zone all the time. The big play is what will kill this Cardinals defense because they're not equipped to play from behind. And that's something that Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, and Tyler Conklin, for crying out loud, they have so many options who could spring a big play. That's what terrifies me the absolute most about this going into Sunday. The Cardinals need to stop the big play from happening.
Alex does great work over at Locked On Cardinals. Check him out over there. And John does great work over at Locked On Jets. Check him out over there. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Titans and Chargers round out the 4 o'clock window of games. The Titans are just reeling this season, and it's been a rough go for them. The Chargers, on the other hand, they're playing well under Jim Harbaugh. So Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans and David Drogemeyer of Locked On Chargers, get ready for game time.
All right, David, we're going to cap off today's edition of Locked On Titans, Locked On Chargers. It's crossover Thursday. We've done the biggest storylines for both teams. Now we're going to get into some keys to victory. Again, thank you for making Locked On Chargers and Locked On Titans your first listen. For your second listen, make sure that you check out Locked On NFL. I am one of the lead hosts of Locked On NFL. They call me the Madman for a reason. You're going to get all of your Chargers or Titans news here Monday through Friday in under 30 minutes. Make sure that you get all your NFL news with Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And even if you don't like me, Tony Wiggins in the afternoon, breaking it down in the barbershop, you're going to enjoy that as well. But looking at keys to victory in this game, I'll kick us off here as the away team. For the Titans, they have to stop the run. For the Los Angeles Chargers, if the Chargers are able to have success in the run game, they're just going to be unstoppable. You want to get Justin Herbert into 3rd and long, and you want to get that interior pressure from Jeffrey Simmons, Sebastian Joseph Day, revenge game. There's a lot of revenge on this field in this matchup with the Chargers side and the Titans side. Kenneth Murray as well, blitzing up the middle. That'll be big for the Titans, but they got to stop the run to get in those 3rd and long so they can get that pressure going. On the offensive side of the ball, I talked about the 2 high safeties that the Chargers like to play, one of the most in the NFL. They're really going to have to hit those short, quick timing routes. I usually say run the ball for the Titans is the key to victory on offense. But in this one, I really think the Titans need to focus on the short, quick timing passing game, try to take advantage of, the numbers game there with having two high safeties. Now, if the Chargers come out and do something different than what they normally do, then the Titans will have to adjust there. But that would be something that I'm looking for. And then finally, special teams. We talked about it. The Titans have been awful on special teams. I would venture to say that they're the worst team in the NFL in special teams right now. They've had multiple blocked punts. They give up big returns every single week. The Chargers offense has been up and down. If you give them short fields and you make it easy on them to get points, I really think another thing, to give a bonus one is red zone efficiency. I don't think that because of how good the defenses are in this game, I don't think there's going to be a ton of opportunities to get into the red zone. So when you do, you need to take advantage. And the Titans, if they don't play well on special teams, they're going to give the Chargers more red zone opportunities than they are going to get. And that's going to skew things. So I'm going to say stop the run. The quick, short passing game for the Titans has to be accurate and precise. And they need to play well on special teams to help their red zone efficiency on offense and defense. So that's kind of my keys to victory for the Titans in this one.
Yeah, I think all of those make a lot of sense. Definitely when you're going up against this Chargers team. For me, it's going to sound a little bit similar. Win the special teams battle is the first one. Yeah. Play a clean game is the second one. And win in the red zone is my third. The Chargers have an all-pro punt returner. His name is Darius Davis, and he just returned from injury last week, and he kicked things off in style with a 53-yard punt return that set up the Chargers' touchdown to Joshua Palmer. And so, like, those special teams plays can change the trajectory of a football game. They really, truly can. And, hey, for the Titans, just against the Lions, the Titans allowed 3 returns of 60 yards, including a 90-yard punt return touchdown. And per PFF, the Titans rank 30th in special teams grade. So that's an area where the Chargers definitely have an advantage, and they need to push that advantage in this game. Play a clean game. When you're trying to avoid an upset, which, I think, these two teams are going in opposite directions, like, you have to play a clean game. You can't have the boneheaded mistakes. Honestly, the Chargers should be on a 4-game winning streak, but they fumbled the ball inside the 5-yard line against the Cardinals, and, you just can't do that. And for the Chargers, they've done a pretty good job of that. They've only turned it over 4 times all season long. So that includes the penalties as well. You got to have a clean game from that perspective, because that can put you behind the 8 ball, put you in those 3rd and 15, 3rd and 20 situations that the Titans want to put you in. So you have to avoid that. And the Chargers are only averaging 4.7 penalties over the last 3 games. So they've gotten a lot better from that perspective. And like you mentioned, win in the red zone. Like, if you hold the Tennessee Titans out of the end zone, you're going to win the football game. The Titans ranked 26th in red zone touchdown scoring percentage over the last 3 games. The Chargers have been 22nd in red zone touchdown scoring percentage. So not great. I mean, both these teams, they don't get there often. And when they do get there, they're not scoring enough. But on the flip side of that, the Chargers rank 2nd at red zone percentage on defense. So they are not allowing a lot of people there, and they're not letting you score when you get there. So when you get those opportunities, like you mentioned, they're probably going to be few, far between, and precious. You have to make them count. You can't be trading field goals, which, hey, it might come down to that. But when you get those opportunities in the gold zone, you got to cash in.
Yeah, 100%. That's going to make a big difference in this game, because I don't think that it's going to be some high-scoring affair here. I
would agree.
It might be a race to 20 points. If you get to 20 points, you're probably winning this game.
Tyler is awesome. Check him out over at Locked On Titans. David is awesome. Check him out over at Locked On Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the final part of the Ultimate NFL pregame show, we got a couple of awesome primetime matchups to dive into. Don't go anywhere. Plenty to get to on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, your live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We return as the Ultimate NFL pregame show, Week 10 edition. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. We got a couple of awesome primetime matchups to get into to round things out here. First of all, Detroit Lions and the Houston Texans. The Lions looking like one of the best, if not the best teams in the NFL this season. And you got the Houston Texans who, man, that offensive line is banged up. They lost Stephon Diggs for the year. C.J. Stroud doesn't look like rookie C.J. Stroud. It's been a little bit of a tough go for them, but of course, they're still leading their division. So we'll talk with Matt Derry of Locked On Lions, and John Hickman of Locked On Texans with everything they have for you heading into this one.
Welcome back in, Locked On listeners. Matt, keys to victory for the Detroit Lions.
John, I look at the Lions, and they've got to get pressure on Stroud. You mentioned it before. When C.J. Stroud has been under duress and under fire these last few weeks with the O-line issues that you've had, he just hasn't been the same guy. It's basic football. It's the same thing with Jared Goff. Jared Goff has been upright for the last few weeks, and he's been on a roll. Lions picked up Zadarius Smith for opportunities like this. Mentioned Pascal coming back. A guy like Trevor Nowaski coming off the edge might get some opportunities. I think getting pressure and getting in that face of C.J. Stroud. Watch Aleem McNeil coming from the middle and that nose tackle spot too is a very good interior pass rusher. I think that could obviously play a big role in this game. Lions get an interception or two off a bad throw. Also, I just think the Lions have got to stick with what they do. I know it's Sunday Night Football. I know it's prime time. Everybody's going to be watching. This is a really good matchup. Last thing you want Ben Johnson to do is to turn this offense too pass happy like they did earlier in the year in the Tampa Bay loss. Keep running the football. Keep pounding it with David Montgomery. Then second touch, you get Jahmyr Gibbs the football. Stay with what's been working, which is ground and pound first, then the play action pass. And number 3, I think field position is huge in this game. Jack Fox is one of the best punters in the league, has really flipped the field a few times this year. Lions are playing a good team. This is a damn good team. They played a good team last week in Green Bay on the road. And they've had a tough schedule here as of late with Minnesota and Dallas. Not that Dallas is good, but that was for you. But let's be honest. Houston's solid. And if they get Nico Collins back, last thing you want to be giving them is a short field. Jack Fox as a weapon in the punting game. Jake Gates making his field goal so that he's kicking off rather than a miss from 47 and then a short field for the Texans. I think field position will be important in this one. How about you for the Texans?
Man, I think the Houston Texans, so they get into the red zone, they're not scoring touchdowns. That's a problem for the Texans this year. And so much so, not only are they not scoring touchdowns in the red zone, but in the last 2 games, you want to know how many points they combined for in the second half? 6. You're not going to beat elite teams that way. And I don't think a lot of people would have thought us saying the Detroit Lions is an elite team, but they are. And they're put together very well. So this is one of those games where I think they need to, pull out all of the stops, but they got to score when they get down in their red zone. They got to put up 7. CJ Stroud said a couple of weeks ago, we need 7 more than we need 3, and that's a fact. They are not being able to assert themselves offensively in the second halves. And when you play a team like the Detroit Lions, your defense is going to eventually get wore down when you have a David Montgomery, a Jahmyr Gibbs, who, by the way, is saving my fantasy team, so shout out to him, and a Jared Goff, who is in complete control of that offense right now. They know how to take away teams' strengths defensively, but they also know how to maximize their strengths. And so for Houston, it has to be a shootout in a sense. The defense has done a very good job this year giving this offense opportunities to score. I think the field position has been good for the Houston Texans for the most part, but they have way too many games where the defense is giving you 5 drives of stopping teams offensively, not scoring points, or only limiting them to 3 points, and then the offense goes out there and give them a dud. So that's unacceptable. The key to victory is just scoring points. This is one of the worst passing defenses in the NFL, by the way, so hopefully they can get Nico Collins back, but if not, you signed Dalton Schultz in the offseason to nearly $12 million, and he's been very lethargic this year to this point. You need more of him. You need more of Tank Dell, who got it going last week against the New York Jets, and I think they have a better secondary than Detroit. So hopefully he can continue that trend. And then overall, I think right now Detroit is 3rd in the league in terms of turnover.
Yeah.
You can't turn it over. You cannot give that offense more opportunities to put up points, because if you do, they're going to do the Texas 2-step.
Yeah.
They stepped on Dallas, and they may step on Houston. But I think this is a game I have to be for real, and I think this is a Detroit Lion game, 31-21 type of game.
Wow. I'm going to go 24-21, 27-24, something like that, Lions. I think it's going to be close. You mentioned the number from our friends at FanDuel is 3.5. Houston did not play well last week, as you talked about. Had some extra time off, might get Nico back. I still like the Lions. I have a hard time going against the Lions right now. They've won 6 in a row, and they've been on a crazy stretch, 4 out of 5 on the road, and they're about to, if they win this game, would go 5-0 during that stretch. That'd be pretty good. So I'll go 27-24. I think it's going to be a close game and a nice test for the Lions as they kind of wrap up this tough stretch. So
one more question, Matt. A couple of seasons ago, we all laughed at Dan Campbell getting hired, and he said, we're going to eat your kneecaps.
But bite the kneecaps, yes.
Bite the kneecaps, right? He said, we're going to bite the kneecaps.
That's done, man. No one's laughing anymore.
Nobody's
fantastic job.
I mean, I don't think we've seen a Detroit Lion coach like this.
No.
And like, what has he meant to that team?
It's just culture. It's smarts. It's a really good staff that has stayed together. All these former players, Mark Brunell, the quarterback's coach, Hank Fraley, the O-line coach, Aaron Glenn, the D coordinator, Ben Johnson, he lets them do their thing. And the players love him. He's making good decisions. He's grown as a coach. First year made some mistakes, second year too, but now in year 4, it's all working. It's a great environment, and he's done a great job.
Be sure to check out Matt over at Locked On Lions and John over at Locked On Texans, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last game for you, primetime matchup, and it is another good one. The Miami Dolphins are looking to get back on track. It's been a rough year for them, especially injury-wise. This is probably their last gasp, and they probably have to win out from here on in order to even have a shot at the playoffs. They're going up against the Los Angeles Rams, and we have Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, and you have Doug McCain of Locked On Rams as they take you through key storylines, big matchups, keys to victory, and so much more.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams and Locked On Dolphins. So, Kyle, here in our third segment, optimistic. It's still early. I mean, we have to sit through a whole weekend of games just to get to this game, which I actually really kind of enjoy, kind of the no-stress Sunday of watching the teams around the league. But what are the feels like right now? You optimistic heading into this one?
I think there's some nice building blocks offensively for how Mike McDaniel called that game. Usually when Miami plays Buffalo, they play with this urgency to try to score points and feel like they have to trade possessions. And usually the way that goes against Buffalo is you do it for a couple possessions and then you make a mistake and then Buffalo capitalizes on it. And now you're down 2 scores and you press even more and you try to catch up. And now you go for it on 4th down on 4th and 4 and you're on 46 and you don't get it. And then they get a short field and then they get more points. And it's like, that's how you lose that game 48-20, which is how they lost it in Buffalo last year. They stuck with the script. And I know the game script allowed them to not feel that pressure of like, oh, we're going to fall behind by a possession here. But it was the first time that I thought there was the balance that you alluded to earlier from like a run pass perspective. 31 rushes, but it was 30 designed runs. One of the carries was a scramble on a 4th down from Tua. Do that the rest of the season because whether you're going to win the games or not, Dolphins fans want to know who's accountable for a season that was supposed to be a competitive year. You're 2-6 at the midway point. That's not what anybody expected. You spent a lot of money. You had high expectations. This was supposed to be part of the culmination of what your rebuild was. And it obviously didn't happen. Some of that's you didn't have a good backup quarterback plan. Some of that's other injuries. Some of that's your own self-inflicted wounds and errors. So at more than winning or losing the game for me, like the thing that I take interest in is like, I want to know each week who is accountable for what happens for better or for worse, because you're kind of evaluating everything right now with this Dolphins team, asking yourselves, who's a part of the solution? Who's a part of the problem? Who doesn't need to be here next year? Who do we want to make the centerpieces of what it looks like moving forward? And to have that, it was probably the best resume game Mike McDaniel had as far as like a play caller and sticking to the script and being disciplined and not trying to throw for 400 yards because he's got 2 toys at wide receiver that he likes to get the football to. So I'm excited for that more so than I am, oh, here comes the playoff run. Like I'm not even mentally prepared to wrap my head around that. And my listeners on Locked On Dolphins are very quick to push back and say, pump the brakes. We got to figure out what we are as a football team. So it's another data point in that set. And for that, I'm definitely excited.
Yeah, I think Rams fans are kind of similar too. It's kind of a one-game schedule type mentality where, let's not get ahead of ourselves in the division, the playoff race, lots of football to be played. I think you look at this being a really compelling matchup for both teams because of where they're at, and both have really the Rams have definitely found their groove. The Dolphins look like they could be on the brink of finding their groove. And yeah, the thing that kind of makes me a little fearful is Tua starting to really get that efficiency back. He's settling back in after the injury. Waddle, Reek, you got Devon A-Chain, who's been really fantastic, the best player on offense all season. I mean, 420 yards on 93 attempts, and the receptions too, the balance that he brings to 37 catches. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a weapon. And you look at this Rams defense, look, they have been a lot better. There's no doubt about it, but they're still 23rd against the pass this season. McDaniel with a couple extra days to prepare, really looking at ways to exploit that. It's a great head coaching matchup too. Also look McDaniel 8-15 on the road throughout his career. Dolphins going all the way to the West Coast, going up against an elite quarterback, an elite head coach. Feels like the Rams, though, kind of the momentum that they've built. I think we're going to see a high-scoring game. I think we're going to see some big plays. It's going to be one of the more entertaining Monday Night Football games all year. But the Rams have just kind of sort of find this magic where they just find ways to win football games, whether it's getting a turnover late, getting a role player to step up, make a big play. I mean, Demarcus Robinson is the guy who scored 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. He's the guy that catches the 39-yard walk-off touchdown. So this team realizes that their margin for error is extremely thin, and you have to win these big games at home. And I just think the Rams, not ready for a score prediction yet. And of course, yeah, Rams guy picks Rams to win. Wow, big whoop headline there. But it does feel like the Rams kind of squeaked this one out. But man, this Dolphins team, they always scare me, man. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think it's who's going to make the mistake, and that's I think there's going to be one. I'd expect points. I'd expect the over to hit in this game, but I think this is going to be one bounce of the ball or the other. I like to kind of dangle that prediction for Monday or the show before the game to make sure I have that carrot to dangle and get everybody back. So I'm going to sit on my score prediction, but I'm in the same boat you are. I think this is going to be a very entertaining and closely contested football game.
How about the Dolphins fans? I mean, are we expecting a big crowd at SoFi?
I would say there's always, like, no matter where you travel, and I've traveled for Combine and Senior Bowl, and I've traveled for games. I did a game at SoFi, the Bills opener a couple of years ago. You always seem to see just like 1 or 2 people wearing like a Dolphins hat or something like that. It feels like there's just a decent amount of us everywhere. I know there is the SoCal Dolphins fan club is out there, and they're a very strong group. So I think there'll be a decent representation. I don't think it's going to be taking over the house or anything like that. But when they played the Chargers last year in the season opener, they definitely had a strong show out there for that game. So I'd expect to see a decent turnout of Aqua.
Let me ask you this, because I think Dolphins easily top 5 uniform in NFL history. Do you have a favorite Dolphins uniform? Because I still like the mid-90s Dan Marino with the drop shadow. There. So that's the OG one, right? Kind of 80s.
So that
I like the 90s super drop shadow one. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. I think I'll take pretty much any of the combinations that they have other than the one that they have now would be the ones that I'd probably pick. So
you don't like the ones they have now?
No, they're clean, but I
like the throwback with all the stripes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could take I'll take all the throwback ones that they have over the modern era. And I know that was like one of the owner Stephen Ross's like pet projects. So it's like he's all about them because he was one who brought them in. But I think there's such great heritage and the aesthetics of the old school ones, just like Seattle with their throwbacks, and
just all Rams fans. We want our throwbacks back too. I mean,
yeah, man,
kind of a mixed feeling, but they got to sell these jerseys somehow. You know,
Kyle's awesome, and so is Doug. For more on Kyle, check him out over at Locked On Dolphins. For more on Doug, check him out over at Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. That'll do it for this edition of the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Enjoy Week 10. Plenty of awesome matchups, but of course, we'll be right back here in Week 11, taking you through everything you need to know heading into game time with the help of our local experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So again, enjoy your Sunday, enjoy football, and we'll see you right back here soon on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show.